and welcome to Thursdays for the Soul. My name is Reverend Dr. Chris Davies, and on behalf of Faith Info and the national setting of the United Church of Christ, I am glad to welcome you here. Thursdays for the Soul is a predictable time of gathering each Thursday at this time, coming together with offerings for your spirit. Occasionally we have Tuesday offerings, like this upcoming Tuesday's offering on what you can do in this time. It is called Tuesdays for Nurture, and on Tuesday we'll be talking about voters' rights and the census and some impacts from a faith perspective that are coming. Today's offering is about self-care in the midst of a pandemic. And rather than try and introduce everyone, I want to invite them to introduce themselves with the question of, who are you and how has self-care saved your life? So starting with Reverend Elizabeth Dilley, and you can invite the person after that.
Good afternoon, church. My name is Elizabeth Dilley. I serve as the minister and team leader for the Ministerial Excellence Support and Authorization, or MESA ministry team here in the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I'm so delighted to be here with you today. There are so many things that feed my soul, but one of the most important things is people. The people in my family, the people in my friend circle, and you, the church, who are out doing such extraordinary things in such challenging times. You help feed my soul. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to invite Eris to introduce themselves next.
I had a feeling you were coming for me. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eris Eady. My pronouns are she and they, and I am born, raised, and reside in the great city of Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm an artist, I'm an activist. Like all things UCC, I consider myself to be the minister of the church like every other person and every other member. And so I am just honored and grateful to be here. And for me, self-care is saving my life through cooking. I'm not through dishwashing, unfortunately, but definitely through cooking. So that has been what I've been doing to really save my life. And I will pass it over to below me, Reverend Tara.
Thank you, Eris. It's so great to be here. Yes, I'm Tara Barber. I'm the relatively new Minister for Ministerial Support and Accountability on the MESA team in Cleveland, and I'm currently sheltering in place in Seattle. It is so good to be with you. Thank you for giving yourself the gift of this time. And I would say that for me, I backed myself into self-care practices, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but taking care of myself was not something that came naturally. So it's good to be a part of this conversation because maybe you can relate to that too. And I would like to welcome Reverend Chad Abbott to this.
Hey everyone, my name is the Reverend Chad Abbott. I'm the conference minister for the Indiana-Kentucky Conference for the United Church of Christ. It's great to be with all of you. I think that the thing about self-care that has probably saved my life is the gift of friendship, as Elizabeth said, and it has actually brought me from moments of isolation to moments of intimacy. I look forward to talking to you all about that. And I invite my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Christina Lizardi-Hodgeby.
Thanks, Chad. Hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Dr. Christina Lizardi-Hodgeby, and I currently serve on the faculty at Iliff School of Theology in Denver, Colorado. It's great to be with you all this afternoon or this morning from wherever you are. Self-care has saved me in many ways, but it's my approach to self-care in terms of a decolonial, post-colonial framework of resisting empire as self-care that has really reinvigorated and enlivened what that concept of self-care means to me. So I'll share more about that in just a little bit, but for now, I will pass the baton to Patty.
And I'm a retired pastor and teacher and spiritual director. And the thing that self-care has helped me to do is to really be aware of myself and my connection with the earth. helping me to find focus and nurture health and manage anxiety. We're so glad to have you all here with us today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. I know that this way of being in this knowledge hasn't come to you all easily. Some of it know it from and some of us can reach deep into our roots and find those places or reconnect with those places of care for self and care for all that is. And some of us got there the hard way. And Tara, you mentioned that you got there the hard way. So how we'll hold this space is that there'll be presentations or conversation with each of these panelists. And then as we move through the offering, we'll close out with some practice and prayer, and that will be our space together. So Tara, will you please speak into this, this room about how you got here? Why is this important?
Thank you. Excellent questions. And as I said, I really have backed into my self-care practices, and maybe you can relate a little bit, because the actual truth is that I more or less face planted my way into self-care. I had a season in my life when I was not paying attention, we'll just say, and I started literally falling down. And as a somewhat klutzy person, this was not, totally out of the realm of normal, but this was more than usual. And after, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 face plants, I had to stop and really pay attention to what my body was trying to tell me. And so I got still for a bit and I listened, and I realized that part of what my body was saying to me was that there's some things in my life that I literally couldn't stand. Some ways of being, some overwork, some, pushing it to the max type of behavior that really wasn't sustainable, literally sustainable for me in my life. And that, I think, was one of the impetuses for me to begin to start paying closer attention to what my body was saying, to what was happening around me, to get a little bit more centered and grounded again. And so in another season of stress, I remember then taking some deep breaths and saying, okay, before I start falling down on the job, literally, maybe I could listen in for what God has to say and what my body has to say. And at that point, I heard a message that was something like, put one foot in the front of the other. And so that was a reassurance in that moment. And it was an opportunity for me to trust that my body knew and that the spirit in me knew what the good guidance was for me. And that may sound like a strange thing to frame in self-care, but what I've resonated with is this Brianna Waste quote that maybe you've heard something before, that self-care is less about chocolate cake and salt baths and more about creating a life that you don't have to regularly escape from. And, as soon as I say that, there's some hallelujahs and some, well, wait, but I love chocolate cake. And how can you say my bubble bath or my time in the shower is actually my one moment alone in the day? So don't take that from me. And I think there's something beneath this, right, about how do we really shape our lives in the everydayness that is self-care. And maybe that is baking and chocolate cake, exactly. And that's something that you want to literally bake into your life, not just in this time, but in the future going forward. And maybe it is a moment in the shower when you take some breaths and you feel the water flowing over you and you recognize that you are good and holy and this is a sacred moment. Because out of this paying attention, I think I started to be able to appreciate a bit more the sacred in the everyday. So things like lighting a candle at a meal or holding hands, or, my wife and I cheers with our coffee cup every morning, just these little tiny moments of attention and gentleness and love and care have been what self-care has become. And so then I'm not in that place so often of having to just save it up for a vacation day or that great someday that's going to come, that this is then part of my life that I'm creating. And that I think serves us well in this time when things are less than ideal. And we certainly don't need another to-do list of self-care items, but just this way to say, okay, what does my body need? What does my soul need? What is it that's right there in front of me? And how can I lift this up and make it somehow sacred and a ritual of self-care? So that's what I have for you all. I hope that you can take from that what feeds you, and maybe it's some chocolate cake or a bubble bath, and maybe it's something quite different, but I trust that your body knows. Thanks, Chris.
Of course, you know, there's so much in this. I imagine that we're going to hear echoes of this in everyone's, you know, offerings, and that's totally okay. You know, when reaching down deep into the wisdom that we know, there are offerings that are for us all. And sometimes it is chocolate cake, and sometimes it's things like baking bread.
Right.
And I know that bread baking and like those moments of attention are more than just the moments.
Right.
So Reverend Dr. Christina Lizardi-Hajbi has brings in some study and words better than I could say in order to attend to this, to care of self and care of community.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Reverend Tara Barber, for leading us off and inviting some practices that take into account mind, body, spirit, soul, emotion in a holistic way and intention. And my work comes through and comes into a practice of how do we reframe our approach to self care and our practice of self care in ways that are more just, in particular, ways that are negating colonialism and resisting empire. And I look to the words of Dr. Willie Jennings, who's at Yale Divinity School, and he has talked about the demonic virtues of whiteness or the demonic virtues of colonialism. And he talks about the ways that colonialism not only affects those who have been colonized, us as people of color, but who have affected those who are colonizers as well. Here in the US, we function in three main ways that really speak into what is meant by demonic virtues. Dr. Jennings says that this is our need for possession and control, and our need for mastery. And I'll add a fourth one to that, which I think is our need to be producing and our need for production constantly and consistently. And so just I'll frame each of these in a particular way. So I'll start with control and possession. I think in some ways these are two sides of the same coin, but the myth of control and possession tells us that I must have a handle on it, whatever it is, whether it's I have to have a handle on worship services, have to have a handle on my family's health and their well-being, a handle on my kids' schoolwork. I have to have a handle on my work, even though I'm not there working. I have to have a handle on it. And this is really a product of colonialism. And it also is something that feeds into us, those of us who are in helping professions. So if I can do it, I need to do it, and nobody else can do it. So those are just some of the ways that this possession and control really manifest in our lives. And what this pandemic has shown us is that control is an illusion. Possession is an illusion. And so instead of this demonic virtue, what if we said instead a love virtue and asked the question, what would it look like to let go rather than to control as an act of self-care? What would it look like to let go and let the spirit in, to move into openness and moments of chaos or confusion or even messiness? And so sharing the work so that it's not all on you in terms of that sense of control. So by practicing a negating of control and possession, you are resisting empire assumptions that center control as a measure of success. So that's the control part that we want to negate through our self-care. The mastery part of negating the sense that we must be perfect, that I must be perfect to know and do it all. That's the myth of mastery that we see here. So the expectation is that whatever we do in the world, it must be done well to a standard that someone else has set, right? Not us. So, what I noticed about this Holy Week and this Easter is that a lot of pastors felt this undue pressure to get their online services and their offerings to be perfect, to be on point, right? And to be delivered without glitches. Otherwise, maybe parishioners would not be happy. They would have their own standards set that would be disappointed. Ramadan starts tomorrow, and I know that many imams are equally nervous about, how do I communicate to everyone? How do I put up prayer services that are perfect in that way so that people can follow them and have enhanced spiritual experiences? But perfection is unrealistic, right? And it's harmful. It's harmful to ourselves and it's harmful to one another. So, how do we turn this into a love virtue? What would it look like to embrace imperfection, messiness, chaos as an act of self care? What would it look like to have compassion for myself as an act of self care? And one of the ways that I embrace imperfection in my own life is through the process of bread baking. So Chris mentioned earlier that that some of us do a lot of baking. I do a lot of baking in terms of sourdough. I have been using a sourdough starter now for about 6 months and have been trying to perfect it. And let me tell you, there is no perfect solution to how to make sourdough bread. I have had versions that have gone basically to feed our squirrels for the last several months, and there have been some versions that have been edible. But it's not about that. It's about the process. It's about the process of what that work involves, how tangible it is, so I can feel the flour and the dough. It doesn't need to be perfect in order for it to be creative, and to be self care. The other thing about mastery is that um, we like to focus on content, right? That if we master what we're saying or what we're doing in terms of content, that's the perfection. But rather than an attention to content, how might we prioritize connection? How do we gain connection so that we express mutual love and care for one another? And how might our lack of mastery of something provide space for that connection and creativity to flow? And that provides space for others to then share their own gifts. We do not need to be quote unquote master in order for the whole to share what everyone can bring to a particular community or space. And finally, I mentioned production as um, the last sort of demonic virtue. And the myth of production tells us that whatever we produce must be something of value, or what I must be producing in order to be of value, right? So that I can have value. And this may not come as a surprise to you, but humans are not machines. We are not designed to be machines. Yet, the colonialist structure of our country wants us to be producing and doing 24/7 for empire, right? For production, for the sake of production. And this is true for ministers. This is true for others in helping professions. We always have to be on, right? And this has deep roots in our Western Protestant work ethic. You know, that the hard work reaps rewards, it reaps success. And this kind of thinking is not only um, problematic for those who are white Western Protestant folks, but it's problematic because it paints people of color as not productive. And what does that mean? Productive to whose standards? So when you're a parent and you're being asked to work from home and be productive, while also caring for children in your household? How are you supposed to hold those things in tension with one another? I also see a lot of articles online now about now you have all this free time at home to write the great American novel or to take up 5 new hobbies. Um, and this really minimizes the fact that what we're going through now is a kind of trauma. And our work is not to be producing all the time in this moment. So, as the love virtue, what would it look like to rest, to not produce as an act of self care? Recently, one of my students shared with me a wonderful ministry called the NAP Ministry. And if you do not know about the NAP Ministry, I suggest you follow them on Facebook and you follow them on Instagram. They are a ministry based in Atlanta that emphasizes rest as resistance against the forces of colonialism. They say that rest is a right, not a privilege, and sleep deprivation is actually a racial and social justice issue. So, rest is important. It is central to our doing and our being as human beings created by God. It is part of our rhythm of life, and production as machines is not sustainable. So that's a lot of words and a lot of concepts to begin to think about, but I invite you to begin to embrace loving virtues, to let go instead of control, to embrace imperfection and messiness for the purpose of connection rather than mastery, and to rest rather than continue to produce. So let your self care reflect all of those love virtues in your doing, your being, your humaning in this world.
Amen, Pastor. Oh, you are speaking words that I know that I need to hear, and that many folk who are holding so many people in this time needed to hear as well. Particularly, I'm thinking about you, in speaking about mastery and perfection and the aiming for perfection. Even coming onto this call, we had to wrestle with our imperfection to not have it all right immediately, which puts us in the same boat as so many pastors everywhere, and that's okay. Oh, and our next panelist speaking is Reverend Chad Abbot from the IKC conference. And I know that you don't come into this alone. I know, in fact, that being alone is not at all what you have to speak about. So I want to invite you into this space to bring your wisdom, further. And please.
Thank you, Chris. And it's wonderful to be here. Again, I'm Chad Abbott, and I greet each of you today from my home here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I am just so deeply honored to be with these immensely gifted people. I mean, what's been said so far, it's so hard to be a part of that conversation because it's so deep and rich. And thank you both to Tara and Christina so far, and looking forward to hearing what others have to say. But we have been tasked with asking the question, what does it mean for us to tend to self-care in a pandemic? And I guess when I think of self-care, I think of like tending to the soul. And such tending, I guess in my experience, has always been an incredibly intimate experience. Tending to the soul, I guess, is intimate because it addresses not just, this aspect over here or this aspect over here of my life, but it seeks to be attentive to the whole self. And tending to my soul, to my whole self, has certainly been a challenge during this time of pandemic, because some of these aspects of myself are in tension with each other, because some of them are exactly what Christina was just describing, and they're in tension with each other. So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a sibling, I'm a friend, I'm a godfather, a neighbor, I'm a pastor, a conference minister, a spiritual director. I'm a scholar of the contemplative arts, and gosh darn it, I am a nature lover, and I just want to be outside. And it's been difficult for sure. And as you think about all of those identifiers I just named, so many of them, you can see why they have tension with each other. And it's because they each bring their own like set of unique challenges in and of themselves. But when trying to tend to the wholeness with which I was created, this pandemic has really put me in a challenge for finding a way to connect the whole self. So I guess at times, my being a conference minister, such as trying to, the issue of perfection, trying to offer support, trying to offer encouragement and protocols for 130 churches, I mean, sometimes that literally takes my entire week. And other times I'm a father, right? So my role as a father means I'm trying to be attentive to the hard work of e-learning, which I'm now learning how to deal with right triangles again, and I got a C in geometry. So what am I going to do? And because all of that is happening at one time, there are literally days where I have no time for experiencing spiritual practices, or days where this nature lover literally does not go outside. And so I guess that is why this is all really difficult, to tend to the soul, to tend to our self-care. And I've discovered as a conference minister that in all of my checking in with pastors and churches, that I've become increasingly aware that not all of us come to this pandemic moment from the same experience or trajectory. So some of you are, for example, might be single or a widower or widowed, and at home by yourself. And others might be people who are home caregiving for others. And others of you might be working long hours at the hospital, or like some of my neighbors here in my neighborhood are police officers or educators, social workers, where the level of stress is just up here. It's really high. Some of you maybe have been let go from your job or be on furlough. And let's just be honest, like in each of our locations and every family circumstance and every work dynamic, this is just hard. And trying to tend to the soul, to the wholeness with which we were all created, at times can even feel isolating. Because we are all social distancing in this moment, it is easy to experience isolation, even with others that are with you in your own home. You have people that are around you. It can feel isolating. One of the ways that isolation takes place is because we can be fully consumed by some of the narratives of empire that were just named, narratives of mask wearing and testing and number of cases across the country and the globe. I'm so glad that you named production, Christina, because I was going to name that too. Like we are just consumed by that narrative that we have to produce consistently and perfectly. And because those narratives are just always going around, I'm actually finding it really hard to sleep sometimes. I don't know about you all, but because of that, those narratives are just playing over and over in my head. And so what I wanted to do today is just kind of share with you one thing that has been really a balm for my soul during this pandemic moment. And that is the gift of soul friending. The ancient Celtic Christians referred to this as the Anam Cara, or the soul friend. It's that person that you can share your deepest confessions or maybe your greatest of vulnerabilities. And so this week I've been doing lots of reading of John O'Donohue, and I've been reading his books, and there's this marvelous quote where he says, "A friend is a loved one who awakens your life in order to free the possibilities, the wild possibilities within you." Don't you just love that? I love that so much. So in the midst of this pandemic moment, where whether we are alone in our homes, or you're a caregiver with someone you love, or you're consumed with 12 hours a day of work and being in front of a screen, or have the media narratives in your head day after day, night after night, we all risk isolation. And the gift that I have found for self-care has been tending to the intentional relationships that matter the most to me, the people that deeply ground me. So today, I brought with me my tea mug, and this is my UCC It's Just Love tea mug. In our house, we call it the Mother Love. It is our famous tea mug in our house, and I have come to share this particular mug and tea as a holy experience, that something holy happens when I gather with friends over a cup of brewed hot tea. And so sometimes I will brew some tea here and they'll brew tea wherever they are. And we talk about tea leaves and we talk about what it tastes like. And we talk about life and get our heads out of a pandemic mode. And it's beautiful. There's something holy that happens when you brew tea together and talk. And over the past 6 weeks, I have called upon some of my closest friends, some of my closest family through things like FaceTime and Zoom through the sipping of tea. It's really been like, I don't know, we're able to share our deepest stories together, our pains, our worries, our joys, our excitements, and even our hope. And I've listened to so many stories over the last 6 weeks, and many of them are stories of like deep challenge or even deep courage from, I mean, gosh, anywhere from, let's see, like Delaware to Kentucky and Illinois, Alaska, Washington, Iowa, even Toronto this week. And each moment that I have spent with these soul friendships, I've been able to tend to my soul in a way that brings intimacy rather than isolation. And it's offered me really the strength that I need for making it through this difficult journey. And it has just been really restorative to me. So when you hear me say the word soul friend, what I'm referring to is that person that makes you come alive within, whose soul echoes with yours when you are together, whether that's really in person or in virtual technology like this. I just believe that friendship has a way of grounding us, of nurturing us into whom God has truly created us to be. And those such soul friendships are, I guess if I were to compare it to something, it'd be like the roots of a tree that are firmly planted in the earth. And they cannot be easily moved by the winds or harsh, harsh weather of the world. And just yesterday, my family and I, on the 50th celebration of Earth Day, we planted a tree, this sugar maple that a good soul friend of ours has given us. And we planted it in our backyard. And I think about that tree as the fact that it's really young, and its roots really aren't that deep just yet. But I know that over time, its roots will go really deep, and wind will come and harsh rain and weather will come and it will not go down. And that to me is what soul friendship is like. It's something that deeply roots us. And so that when we can go through a moment like this pandemic moment or hardship moments of grief, that we will not be moved by that because we have the hope and assurance of those soul friends who ground us in the Spirit of God. And it's like the psalmist says, like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. So I guess when I say that word soul friend, I imagine that you see a certain face and you hear a certain voice. They all come to mind when I say that word. I wonder if you see them right now or you hear their voice. And I wonder, have you called that person lately? Have you written to them? And I wonder what it would be like for us to tend to our souls, to each other's souls, and to experience self-care through the deep friendships and abiding and intentional friendships that are around us. Perhaps that is someone that you have known for years. Maybe it's someone in your family or your church, your neighborhood, or even someone in the chat feature of this online discussion today. But whoever they are, I encourage you, grab your Mother Love tea mug, brew some tea, grab your cup, call, write your friend, and allow the Spirit to free the wild possibilities that are within you. Take care, wash your hands, and may God bless and keep each of you. Thank you, Chris, for letting me be with you all today.
Thank you for being here. It is, you've been posting about soul friendship for a while, and it has really inspired me. And this conversation is inspiring me to reach out to people who are near and dear to my heart. So I thank you for that. Practice in self-care is important, and time for practice is important. Patty, I know that you are a practitioner of so many things. And I'm curious if you can share some of your experience with all of us. How have you been taking care of yourself in the midst of all of this?
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been, of course, staying home, staying safe, as our governor here in Michigan has told us to do, and trying my best to get along with my spouse of 40 years and my little dog, Sheltie. And Chad, listening to you, I haven't framed it like this, but I've chosen 5 friends to call every single day. They are all people who live alone, who I'm afraid will experience maybe more severe isolation. And I offered it in friendship, but what I found is that so much is coming back from that. Because sometimes they're calling me before I call them, and they're asking me for my joke of the day. I'm always looking for a corny joke to just share, just to lighten the mood a little and to have something that's kind of constant that we share with each other, a kind of a lightness of being. But I think the thing that I do the most that helps me is something I call praying with the earth, or breathing with the earth. I try to take 3 really deep breaths, and as I breathe in and as I breathe out, to be aware of myself and my connection with the earth and my connection with everything that's going on.
And how has that been working for you in the midst of everything?
Well, the way it's been working for me is that I'm trying to breathe in goodness, light, and love, and breathe out stress and anxiety and worries. When I was a local church pastor, I'm retired now, I found that I was clenching a lot in the midst of all the competing demands, and the never being able to do everything. And so I started the practice then where I would breathe in, just because sometimes in between meetings, I didn't have time for 10 minutes of prayer. So I just take 3 really deep breaths. So breathe in awareness of myself and my body and the places of clenching, and then breathe out release of those things. Then I would try to breathe in awareness of God and God's presence and God's love for me. And then I would try to breathe out the fears of not being good enough. And then lastly, I would try to breathe in this sense of being in the light of God, and of hopefulness about what God may be about to do. And then try to breathe out all the worry and all the sense that there is more to do than I can ever accomplish. And that really helped me quite a lot.
Amen. I'm mindful that the psalmist writes, "Be still and know that I am God." And I am also mindful that my Hebrew professor would say, "Be still is unclench." So
Yes.
unclench
Yeah.
and know that God is.
Yes.
So you are unclenching in each breath. And I am curious if you can lead us all in this breathing exercise.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. And I'd like to frame it my sabbatical work was with the studying in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. And there's a Bible verse from Romans that seems to be just echoing for me right now. He says that we know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains. And I feel that. I feel I'm groaning with all of the problems with the earth is groaning, and certainly all of humanity is growing right now. And we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly, waiting for adoption and the redemption of our bodies. So that verse helps me to look to the future. So I'd like to invite us all now to settle ourselves, to sit up straight with our feet planted firmly on the ground. And if the ground for you, like me, is carpeting, or maybe it's wood, just imagine that it's the earth. Maybe it's with grass, or maybe it's stone. And you're planting your feet firmly on the ground. And then imagine that you are being lifted up towards the sky from the center of your spine, so that the straightness is not heaviness, but it's lightness, because you're being carried, you're being held up. And then place your hands on your lap with your palms facing upward in an attitude of openness and receptivity. Now, you ready? Take in a deep breath. And as you breathe in, notice your body. Where is there tension? In your stomach, chest, neck, shoulders? Feel those places of tension. And as you breathe out, release those tensions. Just let them go, loving yourself and offering that release as healing for the tensions of the earth. Now breathe in again. And as you breathe in, notice the world around you. What can you see, feel, hear, remember? I invite you to feel gratitude for your belonging in the earth. And as you breathe out, offer thankfulness for the beauty of the earth and for life. And now breathing in again. Let your chest really expand. Invite yourself into wonder at what good and hope may come from this time of isolation. And as you breathe out, imagine your breath to be carrying blessing upon the earth and all its inhabitants, and especially for all that you hold dear. Now that you've had your 3 breaths, notice how you feel. Is there any lightness of being? Is there any tension that's kind of sticky and doesn't seem to want to loosen up? Don't resist it. Just notice it, whatever it is, and offer it up to God. Well, that's it. I do something like this every day, sometimes many times during the day. And I find it helps me to orient myself and to be purposeful and to follow my life mission, which is to awaken spirit. It helps to reduce my reactivity. I can't say it's gone, I would be lying, but it helps me to lessen the reactivity and open myself up to hopefulness about what I can be today and hopefulness for the future that is yet to come.
Amen. It's so poignant on these just days after Earth Day that we're grounded with intention in our roots in the earth, in practices that are decolonized, in awareness that we are more than what we produce. All of this is moving in deep intention. So thank you, Patty. I also am delighted to introduce, again, the poet, the activist, the author, Eris Eady. And Eris brings wisdom that I am regularly blessed to be in community with in multiple spaces. So I am grateful for your being, as one chat person said earlier, and not your doing. And I'm so happy that you're here.
It's so funny. So I've been writing notes on Post-its and sticking them up onto my desktop right in front of me, just from everything that you all have said. It's blessed me tremendously. And so I'm grateful. You know, for me, self-care has been quite the journey. As a writer and an author, I have used poetry as a means to heal things that I thought were unhealable in my life. And I got to a certain point where I needed some additional tools. And so for those of us who didn't really who grew up like preacher's kids like me, who grew up in like the Baptist and the Pentecostal, you know, Jesus is the only therapist you need. He will make it better. He will fix it all. I just encourage you all, especially in this season, to know that God ordains therapists. They have called therapists. And it has blessed my life tremendously. But what I would love to share with you all is in my first book, Journey to Whole, I had this kind of epiphany based off of Proverbs 3:5, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own understanding. And it goes on to say, like, in all your ways, acknowledge him, direct your path, the whole nine. And I had this epiphany back then when writing this, that, trusting God has nothing to do with God themselves, but has everything to do with our ability to have faith, to be able to set up the vehicle, to be able to trust. And a good friend of mine today posted on social media, she posted on Facebook on Instagram that said, understanding is not always enlightening. And that really, really spoke to me in this season when we're being really immersed with so much information about this pandemic, about COVID. Some of us want to know everything that there is to know. And understanding is not always going to be enlightening for us. Understanding is not always going to care for us in the way that just trusting and not leaning on our understanding of it will do. And so it won't always bring you the comfort that you think you're seeking. And so it's that reminder for me to take the things that I'm grabbing externally and to see what I can exude from my inside out and let that faith shine out. Let the things that God's called me to be, the things that have made me me and have carried me through, to be the thing that will literally save my life once again and again. And so when I wrote the follow-up to this book, which is called Bruh, Poems to Pay for Alimony, it's a long story. You can hear about it in the book, but title pretty much tells you it's so. But, in writing this book, I was in the middle of my divorce, and I really wanted to be able to capture what it meant to write through the middle of this really, really tumultuous season that I was in, and didn't assign any type of parameters around it. Just get out what you can get out and share what you need to share, because it might be helpful for other people the same way it was helpful for me. And I'll share with you all this poem that I wrote in February, and it's called Wake Up. And it says, I thought about what waking up on the other side of tribulation must feel like. It's the stillness off-putting. When peace arrives, it often manifests first as loss, then as pain, perhaps anger, a riptide of faults and finger pointing. Then it gets quiet. The interrogation of the soul persists. The brain chatter is often paralyzing, a shadow on Groundhog's Day, replaying the same trauma, different cast, still without mending in sight. How long you gonna feel sorry for saving yourself? And, I think this poem right now really speaks to me and speaks to the season, because we're all thinking about what this is going to look like, what the other side of this pandemic is gonna look like. And at the end of the day, you cannot feel sorry for saving yourself. And it's just a reminder that as much as we can do for others, put that energy right back into you and see what God can do. When you really give to yourself what you're willing to output for other people all the time, as a Femme of Center Black human, being acculturated as a Black woman, we have been the mule so many times and been told that we have to give, give, give. And I was like, what happens if I give, give, give to me? And it has blessed me tremendously to pour into me the way I pour into other people. And so if anything, I would just offer you all the opportunity to extend yourself some grace and to do for you what you would do for others, and see how it will bless you. So I'm just grateful that I could be here. That's all I got, Chris.
That's not all you got. Oh, listen, I'm just going to lay all of these truths in front of all of us for everyone who's participated. I feel so blessed by this panel in ways that I didn't know that I needed. So for all of you for pastoring me and for pastoring all who are with us, whether here in the webinar or whether watching the recording, thank you on behalf of myself and to all of the people here. Oh, before we close our time together, I want to lift up a few different things. The first is that Thursdays for the Soul and ministries like this are supported by you. They're supported by the people who are here on this webinar and those who donate. If you want to text to donate to support ministries like this, you can text UCC to 4144. And after this offering, Thursdays are every week on Thursday at this time, we'll be here. occasionally, we'll also be here on Tuesdays with more offerings that can be educational, can be nurturing, can engage in other ways. This upcoming Tuesday, there's a webinar on voters' rights and the census and what we can do together in this time. And a week from today, we will be gathering together for practices of lament. So know that that is what is coming. So thank you for being here. Text to donate if you feel so called. And I want to invite Elizabeth Dilley to pray us out. And at her amen, I will be moving us into our closing bit, and you are free to go into your day blessed.
Dear ones, as Eris was finishing her words and as Chris was beginning her introduction to the end, my spouse came home, my dog started barking, and then my child slid a little chocolate bar over to me, a chocolate bar that my spouse brought for me, a special treat, which is his special delight to do for me and for our child most every day. Beloved, I have a soul friend in my spouse, and I am so blessed for that. And I am so blessed in this moment as well to share in the wisdom and to hopefully have an opportunity to bless that forward through this prayer. So I invite you to do, to sit or to stand or to fold yourself up into a posture of prayer, connect with your body, connect with the earth, connect with the Spirit as we pray together. Bountiful, gracious God of life, this is so hard. This life that we are living right now, it is just very hard. But we know that you call us into wholeness, into resurrection, and into courage. So whether we jump or fall into self-care practices, help us to do so, trusting in your arms to shepherd and shelter us. Help us to shape our ordinary, everyday life in the growing awareness of your presence, your grace, and your power. We lift up the whole of our lives to you, O God, in all of its messiness and chaos. We ask that you release us from those demonic virtues of possession, control, mastery, production. Release us, and better still, give us the spiritual and physical strength to let go of those virtues instead. To resist empire, to bring about your realm in our lives and in our world. Give us the tools through these practices of self-care to cultivate compassion, messiness, holy chaos, to prioritize connection, to strive for excellence, but not perfection. Help us to rest. Help us to tend to our souls and to find those soul friends who call us into life. Teach us to breathe with your beautiful earth, with the whole of your magnificent and glorious creation. Above all, quiet and persistent one, wake us up and give us grace sufficient to offer to ourselves all that we are so glad to offer to others. God, you are in our midst. You are within and among us. You are alive. Help us to live. Amen.